Today's show is brought to you by Audible, and right now you can get a free audiobook download and 30-day free trial at audibletrial.com/joinedup. There's over 180,000 titles to choose from for your iPhone, Android, Kindle or MP3 player. Thanks for tuning in to the Joined Up Writing Podcast, a weekly show featuring interviews with fantastic authors sharing their personal stories on how and why they write. There's hints and tips for aspiring writers and great book reviews from top bloggers. Follow us on Twitter at JU Podcast. Right, cue the cheesy theme tune.
Put down your pen and stop your typing. Grab yourself a drink, 'cause it's Joined Up Writing.
Hello and welcome to the Joined Up Writing Podcast, where a little procrastination can go a long way. I'm Wayne Kelly and it's episode 81 with crime writer Niki Mackay talking about her debut novel, pitching agents, her writing process and more, and there'll also be time for another trip to Book Bloggers Corner with Emma Rose Hollands reviewing The Sons of Thestian by M.E. Vaughan. Before we get cracking with all of that, my regular update finds me in good spirits. Firstly, at least as I record this, because the sun is shining here in the UK and it's hot, a rare treat, and I'll be on my own summer holidays soon anyway, but also because it's happened, finally. My novel, or at least parts of it, are now out into the world being read by actual people who could have an impact on whether it gets published or not. I realise I've spent the last few show intros complaining about having to write a synopsis. In fact, a future guest made me realise just how much I'd been whining about it, so for that I apologise. Well, you'll be glad to know I eventually cracked it. And how did I do that? Well, the same way we write anything. I just wrote the story, finally letting go of the nagging voices telling me I'd blown the word count, and then I edited it, just like we do when we write our stories or novels or anything else. I let the word count stifle my attempts at getting the first draft down. That was what the problem was. So there's a lesson there. You can't edit a blank page, so stop moaning and get on with it. And just in case you forgot why I was even writing the synopsis, it was for a competition that requires the first 3,000 words of the book plus a 600-word synopsis. Well, I've made my submission, and it was never with any massive expectation to getting placed in the competition. Well, that's very, very unlikely. But it has focused my mind to start considering the novel as finished enough to begin submitting it to other places. And it also means I've got a pack ready to send out. And on that subject, I've recently been asked if I would like to send the manuscript for consideration to a new imprint being started by an established publisher, which means as you listen to this, the first sort of 15,000 words or so of that book will be awaiting the scrutiny of some objective readers. It's exciting and, of course, a bit terrifying, but it's really galvanised my desire to finish the next round of edits on my book and, of course, start the next one. So, anyway, that's my news, so I'm feeling pretty positive at the moment, but what's yours? I'd love to hear what's on your mind, what you're working on, or just your general thoughts on the show, or my guests. So don't forget, you can tweet me at MrKelly2U, or the show at JU Podcast, or you can drop me a line at wayne@waynekellywrites.com. Just one final note before we get into the interview. Next week will be Niki's epilogue episode, but then there'll be a 2-week break. Even podcasters need holidays before a new show drops on July the 31st. Right, on with today's interview with the lovely Niki Mackay. Niki is a writer and a bookworm. She studied performing arts at the Brit School before eventually doing a BA honours in English literature and drama, and later winning a full scholarship to do an MA in journalism. Her debut novel, Eyewitness, the first in a series featuring private investigator Madison Atterley, was published by Orion on the 19th of April 2018. I really enjoyed chatting to Niki, and I know you'll be able to relate to lots of her experiences. Okay, Niki, thanks a million for joining us on Joined Up Writing. Really appreciate it. So, I think we just mentioned briefly before we came on air, so you've just got back from Crime Fest in Bristol. So, how was that, first of all?
It was amazing. It was really, really good fun. It's my third one, but it's the first one since I've had a book out, so it was very cool. Very cool, yeah.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask you about, because I know from reading on your blog and stuff that you've been before, but this was your first time as a published author. So how did the experience differ for you?
Okay, so the first one I went to was 3 years ago, and I did Pitch an Agent, which was really useful. And then the second time I went was last year, and I went for a day, and I knew I had a deal, but my book was kind of a year away from coming out still. So I still didn't really feel in the loop. So yeah, it was really fun this time. It's really different. And I did my first panel, which I was really scared about, but it was fine as soon as I sat down. It was good fun.
It was really good. So you mentioned there, the Pitch an Agent thing that you did in 2016. So, well, for a start, let's take a step back, because there might be people that are listening to this from different parts of the world or anything else. They probably don't even know what Crime Fest is in the first place. So why don't you give us a bit of an idea of what that is, and then tell us about when you did Pitch an Agent.
Okay, so Crime Fest is a convention, I suppose, for crime fiction authors, readers, and it seems to be a massive mix of the two, and it's in Bristol. So it's lots and lots of panels about various things to do with writing. They also have quite a few debut author panels. So when you're not published, I found it really useful to go and sit and listen to how people had got published, how people had written their first books. And also, I suppose if you're interested in crime fiction, it's a complete geek out. So really good fun. So that's Crime Fest. I'm still a newbie really to it. And Pitch an Agent is, so you go in and you send in, I think it's the first 3,000 words of your work in progress and a synopsis. And then you go in and you get to speak to 3 industry agents. And you can kind of pitch your idea to them, I suppose, you sort of go in and pitch.
Essence,
Yeah, it's like a pitch. So it was I really enjoyed it, and I got really lovely feedback. And I guess I kind of got to a point with the book where I didn't know whether it was a goer. I didn't know whether it was any good. It was the first book that I'd written, and I just wanted some feedback. So I went along, and what I really wanted to know when I went was whether I had a chance of getting published at some point. And I got really positive feedback from all 3 agents. And I asked outright whether or not they thought I should carry on writing, because I wanted to know. I had quite a young baby at the time, and I was sort of toying with the idea of whether to go back to work or in an office, or whether to give writing a go. So the feedback I got was really, really useful, although I didn't get an agent from it. I did have some back and forth with them afterwards. So, it was really good. It was really encouraging, I think, which is exactly what I needed at that time.
Yeah, and it obviously kept you going.
Yeah.
So, let's scoot forward a little bit. So, congratulations on your debut novel, which is only just come out as we record this. And it's Eyewitness, isn't it? So, which has got a great premise. So, for our listeners, tell us what it's about.
So it's the first in a series featuring a private investigator called Madison Atterley, and she has just left the CID. She's done a stint in a rehabilitation centre or a psychiatric hospital, and she's come out. She's estranged from her daughter, so she hasn't got custody of her child, and she's setting up a private investigation company. And she's very bad-tempered and doing it in the worst possible grace, I think you could probably describe Madison. And Kate Reynolds has just come out of prison for a crime that she committed 6 years ago, something she was charged with 6 years ago, and which she believes she's innocent. And Madison was the first officer on the scene. So Kate employs Madison to look into it for her. And Madison's absolutely desperate for cash, so she takes the case.
She takes it for all the wrong reasons.
Yeah, pretty much. She does everything to do it, but yeah, pretty much.
So was that the first book that you mentioned earlier, or was this the second book that you actually wrote? It
was the first book that I wrote. It was the first length novel that I'd written.
That's brilliant. So when did you realise that you sort of might have a series on your hands? Did you start out to write a series? Was it always a case of?
So I sat down to write. I was writing bits and pieces of Madison for about a year prior to actually sitting down and putting it together as a book. So she was a reoccurring character in my mind, I suppose. And I sat down and started writing it. And I knew immediately that I like reading series. I've been reading crime fiction for years, since I was a teenager. So I knew that I wanted to write series of some kind. So I sat down and wrote that, knowing that I had ideas for her in the future as well.
to that sort of where it sort of came out of.
Yeah.
And does the idea of a standalone appeal to you as well, or is that?
It really, really does. And so what I did was I wrote the Madison book. I went to do pitch and agent, and then I got back and I had some lovely feedback. I had a few rejections. I sent out to 10 agents, and then I started that long, painful wait while you wait for people to get back to you. And during that time, I thought, well, it's the first book I've written. The chances are it's probably not quite ready. Even if there's something there, I'm probably going to have to do some more work. And I kept reading that it's going to be your second, your third, your fourth novel. So I took some time off. It was the summer holidays. My older boy was away on a school trip. My younger son had just started nursery then. And I wrote a standalone really, really quickly. And thought, well, it's good to have a backup plan, and that will be my second book, and I'll look at this first one as practice. And while I was writing the standalone, I just finished it, and I got a couple of full manuscript requests for the first book when I'd finished that. So I have a standalone in my drawer.
That's great,
so still, yeah, really handy. So and I would like obviously to do the two at some point.
Yeah, at some stage. Yeah. So when you were writing the novel, what would you say came first? Was it your central character of Madison, or was it the story idea? What came first?
Yeah, very much the character. And I think as a reader, I'm very character driven as well. I read a lot of, so historically, I read a lot of psychological thrillers. And for me, character comes first as a reader. So I think naturally when I started writing, character came first. And I've got a low boredom threshold, I guess, as well. So spending that amount of time with people is important. And yet the plot is definitely what needs the most work after the first draft. Yeah.
Absolutely. So why don't you just take a step back then? Why don't you tell us a little bit about how you came to writing in the first place? Because I had a quick look at your biog, and you mentioned Brit School and scripts, and there's some journalism in there and things. So so tell us a little bit about when you realised that writing was where your true passion might lay. Okay.
It's so hard to know, isn't it? I think I've always written, I've always read, and I've always read an awful lot. And I've always written short stories. I used to write extra chapters for Sweet Valley High books, and then I got into Point Horror and Christopher Pike, who I'm still obsessed with. And I used to write little extra bits for those. And I remember doing that quite a young age. I went to the Brit School when I was 14, which is the first year intake. And I think it had probably only been open a few years. I went in 1994. And I thought I was going to be an actress because I wasn't that academic at school. I was like in the top groups for things, but I just could never concentrate. And I quite liked drama, and I quite liked English. So I went to the Brit School. I auditioned and went off there, and it was lovely. It was a wonderful environment. It's an amazing place if you've ever visited. But I was really bad at acting. And I was surrounded by people who were super talented. But what I was good at, I was quite good at devising, and I was quite good at putting scripts together. So I did quite a bit of that while I was there. And and then I went to university and did English literature and drama a bit later when I was 21. And I did a master's in journalism when my older son was 3 and when he started nursery. So I knew in my head that I wanted to write. And I'd kind of tried my hand at office work, which I was terrible at. And I thought about being a teacher because I had an English degree, and what else do you do with an English degree, perhaps? And so journalism seemed like a logical idea, if that makes sense. It seemed like a logical thing that you might actually be able to get a job in. And I was really lucky. I got a bursary from the Journalism Diversity Fund to do my master's. So I was very lucky. And I went and did that. And when I finished, I worked on my local paper for a little while, and I was a single parent at the time. And my son was 4 or 5, I think, when I finished. And it really wasn't, I didn't earn enough to pay the bills. And the hours were very, very long. And I couldn't go to stories that happened in the evening and stuff like that. So I ended up working in PR. And it wasn't really what I wanted to do. It wasn't writing. I think by the time I sat down to write the first Madison book, I was working for a lovely federation, a National Federation of Builders. So it was like a building company, and it was absolutely, the people there were wonderful, but I was writing about flooring and housing, and it just wasn't very me. So I wrote the book instead.
That's so good. Yeah, so their loss is our gain. I mean, obviously you do get a lot of people that do go into journalism and then come out the other side to write a book or whatever. But I can really, really clearly remember when I was at school and I talked about, the idea of wanting to be a writer. That seemed to be the only thing on the table, really.
Yeah.
And the careers officer was terrible anyway. And to be honest, they did their best to put me off.
Yeah,
it's really hard to get into. That's what they said, which is great to say to like a 14-year-old boy. But so they were a bit discouraging. But yeah, I know what you mean. I mean, obviously, as I say, it is writing, and depending on what kind of journalism you can get into. There can be a lot of creativity there, but lots of people, like as you say, fall into PR. Because it's writing, as in you are writing words and you're creating content. But it's not really creative. I know what you're saying. So just tell us a little bit about. So you mentioned obviously. So originally you went to the pitching agent. You got some encouraging feedback, which kept you going, and then you got some full manuscript requests. So you published with Orion, is that right?
Yeah, I'm published with Orion.
So how did that come to pass? What was the journey to publication?
So I've got a really lucky story, I think, to publication. I came back from pitch and agent. I made my husband made a spreadsheet of agents. I listed all of the agents, and I did it the old-fashioned way. I went through the Writers and Artists Yearbook, and I made a list of the first 10 agents that looked suitable, who took crime. I don't know anybody in the industry. I wasn't really sure who did what, but I looked at who they represented and what they were looking for. And I sent out to the first 10, and then I knew that it would be a long wait. So I kind of had an idea of about 4 or 5 months in mind. So while I was out on submission, I wrote the standalone book, just to sort of keep myself occupied. I must add, I was in a really lucky position by this point, in that I was married and my husband was able to support me on maternity leave. While I was doing all of this, I had a small baby and was able to take the time off, which is very fortunate. So while I was waiting, I got a couple of full manuscript requests, and I also got shortlisted for the Luke Bitme bursary at Legend Press, which was really encouraging, although I was not the winner. But that was very encouraging, and it gave me something to put on. I then emailed some of the agents who'd asked for more work and said, I've been shortlisted for this.
Yeah, it's like a great thing to put in a query letter.
I think it is. And I didn't have a creative writing course. I haven't written any short stories. So I was always really quite aware of that as well. So it was a nice thing to be able to put on. And the people who had the full manuscripts were quite quick. And then the person who became my agent, which is Josephine Hayes at the Blair Partnership, emailed and said, can I have an exclusive? Can you send me the full manuscript, and can I have an exclusive? And I didn't really know what that meant. So I had a kind of panic and said, other people have it. And it turns out that she just wanted a chance to read it. And she called and asked me to come in to meet with her. And I did that, and she was really lovely. And it's that really strange conversation where they're kind of, that we'd like to represent you. And I can't imagine saying no. She sort of go away and think about it. So I went away and was sort of, there wasn't much to think about.
You were pretending to think about it.
I'm so bad at playing it cool as well. It's impossible for me. So I pretty much bit her hand off, and she became my agent and has been ever since. And she got me a deal with Orion, a 2-bit deal. It was amazing.
And how did you find? So when you signed with Joe, did you? Was it like, for people that don't know, was there like a whole new process that started? Did you think it was just going to be a case of Joe was going to take the book and then start shopping it around and then off you go? What happened after that? Yeah,
so Joe took the book and then we did some editing. So it was my first experience of doing a structural edit, and I was very open to suggestions. I knew that there were some holes with the book and was very grateful to get some feedback. I don't have a group of beta readers or anything, so she was kind of one of the first people to read as well for me. So we did that, and that probably took a couple of, maybe a month, maybe 6 weeks. I'm really speedy once I get going. And then we kind of did a tidying it up edit, and then it went out on submission with editors, which I think was around about December of, when would it have been? December 2016? Does that sound about right? I think it must have been December. And I knew just before Christmas that she had some editors who were quite warm, but everybody was closing for Christmas.
Yeah, so you had to wait a bit longer.
So I had to wait, but I mean, I didn't. very fortunately for me, I had the deal in place by January. I knew that I had the deal with Orion. So it wasn't a massively long wait or anything, and obviously the most exciting moment ever.
Yeah. So obviously you'd had a short spell where you were thinking, I might not carry on with this writing lark, and then...
Yeah, and there's all these stages to everything. So there's all these funny stages. There's the getting an agent, and you're, yay, I'm home dry, and of course then there's more work to be done. And then there's going out on submission with editors, and all of it's a foreign language, isn't it? You don't really understand what any of it means. Yeah. I didn't really know what on submission meant, and so I was very, very lucky that it wasn't too long in publishing terms, I don't think.
It's quite a steep learning curve, but from whenever I speak to people about it though, they usually say that people are very, very friendly, and they know that you're not going to know everything, and they kind of guide you through it. Yeah,
that's been my experience. And everybody in publishing, the people who work in publishing do seem to genuinely be really lovely. And it's a weird thing because you're on your own an awful lot of the time, tapping away at your keyboard. And I write crime, so I'm writing some quite dark, weird stuff. And then there's suddenly a team behind your book. Mm-hmm. Which is wonderful. And I think I've been fortunate. My editor's really nice and has the same vision for my book that I do, and she seems to understand the way that I work. So it's been a good experience so far.
It's excellent. So what? So you mentioned that you're kind of you're doing line edits now for the next book.
Yeah, I'm on line edits for book 2, which is I Suspect, which will be out in March next year. Yeah,
brilliant.
So, and line edits is my least favourite bit. It's like where I argue with track changes, and I'm fine with all the structural stuff, and the bigger picture stuff is quite
the little tweaks, the specifics.
Yeah, the little tweaks and the specifics is So I'm on that at the minute, which is taking me.
I suppose sometimes some of that is quite subjective. Is it? We don't quite like how you phrase that, or
I guess all of it is subjective as well. I mean, I've never been told. I was hugely open to changes, and there was a big change in book 1. Book 1 is told from the point of view of 4 women, and originally there were 5 characters telling the story, and one of them was a man, and Orion wanted me to cut him from the original manuscript. Mm-hmm. And I was really hesitant. I was so fond of him. Like, he was this checkout guy, and he was great, and I was really proud that I've written a man. Look at me getting into character, and where the drama training is useful, perhaps. And I was sort of like, but I made the change, and actually the book was so much more streamlined as a result of it. So generally these people kind of, you get very close to your work, I suppose, as well.
Of course, yeah. Well, you've spent the longest time with it and invested a lot of your
but it's also quite difficult to be objective about it. So I think you get too close, maybe the characters become like, it's hard to get rid of. Kill your darlings, I suppose someone said that. So that was a learning, but I've never at any stage been told that I have to do anything ever, which has been really good as well. So things that are made as suggestions are a lot easier to implement. So that's been my experience so far. The changes have been beneficial that I have made. The only thing I stuck with was there was a bit of toing and froing about my main character's name, which is Madison, and whether that was too American, and I just couldn't see her as anything else. So that's the only thing that perhaps I've stuck to.
Just dug your heels in a little bit.
Yeah.
And what's your favourite part of the process? I mean, do you like writing the first draft, or is it?
Love writing the first draft.
Is that your favourite part of it? Would you say?
I like writing the first drafts. I'm a great one for beginnings, which is, I'm sure
all
writers. I'm sure that we all have this.
It's so lovely at the beginning. This
on our computer with sort of 3-4 chapters of the best book ever, and then I
think of it as like when it snowed overnight, and you just see it's all crisp. And there's no footprints, it's not been dirtied or anything like that, and it's just ready for you to go out, and then come 20,000, 30,000 words down the line, it's all trampled and dirty, and I can't find your way back.
And it is the 20,000 word mark for me. It's like 15 to 20,000 words where I just lose the will to carry on, the will to live. And I edit up until about 20,000 words. I keep editing.
Right.
And when I've got a solid 15,000 words, I then write blind until the very end. But yeah, the first draft is great once I'm over the first 15,000 words. But now I know that that's going to be painful. I can kind of get through it. So I like the first draft, and I don't mind the structural edits and stuff. It's the detail that I struggle with, and endings. Endings are really hard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So so you mentioned there, because it's funny enough, this is the second conversation I've had in 2 weeks that's been a bit like this, with somebody editing some of the stuff as they go. So with that, is it a case of when you revisit it the next day, do you go over what you wrote like yesterday and you sort of give it a bit of a tweak and you tighten it up as you go? Or when you say you edit that first 15,000 words, how does that work?
15,000 words for me, I can probably get done in a week if I put my mind to it and I just kind of put my head down and get on with it. So I'll write it blind and then go back and keep messing with it until it's solid. So until it feels like a solid foundation, and then I can kind of work out maybe where the story's going, what the ending might be, who did it, I guess, for my books. And that seems to be how I work. I don't know. I'm such a newbie as well. I'm hoping to be able to plan more as well with future books. I'm hoping that that's something that I can learn.
So at the moment,
it's pretty.
No, well, again, I don't think there's any right or wrong way. I think it's whatever works for you. I mean, some people, swear blind that they have to have a really quite a detailed plan before they start off, and other people just kind of go for it. And what I found talking to a lot of authors is many of them, although even the pantsers, they don't tend to, as they've written more and more books, they're still pantsers, but they do tend to plan and outline a little bit more than they probably did when they started. And I think part of it is because a lot of the time as well, you're having to pitch things. You're having to pitch your book probably before you've even written it. Obviously, once you're a couple of books in, it's more you've got an agent or you've got a publisher, and it's okay. Well, we might be interested in your next book. What is it? And so rather than having to send them, they know you can write, and they know the characters of the world or whatever. There's just a case of just tell us what the story is. So I guess you have to think about it before you start ploughing into the first draft. Then, if you do that.
Yeah, definitely. So, I think it's a skill that develops. I assume that you get better as you go.
Yeah. No, I think you do. I think you do. I think you're right. It's like anything else. And the thing with it is, I think it's less a case of whether you find the right way to do it or whatever. I think it's finding the right way to do it for you. It's like you've already kind of, worked out that for you the kind of editing the first sort of 15,000 words and getting it the solid foundations in place before you push on is like that's what works for you. So if that's what works for you, then it's right. It's whatever gets you through the night sort of thing.
I think so. And I always have some sort of idea of what the book's going to be about. If that like a bigger, like the first bit's kind of about motherhood, my second book is kind of about intimate relationships. I sort of have a vague sense of how it's going to feel. Not that it always lives up to, but and an awful lot of rewriting at the moment, which is what I'm hoping to get better at. Time consuming.
Yeah, I don't think, again, I mentioned about this recently, but I just don't think writing is an particularly efficient process. I just think it's one of those things. I reference it in the intro to the show that comes out tomorrow, but I was listening to a podcast with Charlie Brooker, who writes Black Mirror and various different things, Screenwipe and things, and he was interviewed by Adam Buxton recently on his podcast, and he talks about being discouraged when he's writing a script and he'll watch TV or he'll watch a film, he'll watch something that's on Netflix or whatever, and just think, oh my God, this is just so brilliant. I'm going to have to just break my pen in half and never write again. But what he's, then he sits there and thinks about it. And the fact of the matter is, and he knows this obviously because he makes lots of TV programs, is the end product that you see is the result of months, sometimes years of work with lots and lots and lots of people and lots of eyes and lots of revisions before it got anywhere near as polished and clever and intricate as it appears to be. So I think it's easy to forget that when you're starting out. It's easy to make things clever after the fact, isn't it? Which is what we get the benefit of doing. So
And also when there's other people involved. I mean, it's that I have an editor and my editor has an assistant editor, and both of them are bright and can see things that I've missed. And so when it's a team effort, I think it elevates your work, I suppose. Is that a thing? Editing is elevate. I'm sure I've read that somewhere as well, and I think that's probably true too.
I think it is. Yeah, I think you're right. I think it's getting that kind of passion and that energy is in the first draft, isn't it? And the kind of the drive, and then it's kind of it's controlling it and putting it to the best use in the edit. Absolutely. Right, let's take a quick break there for this week's Book Bloggers Corner. And this week, Emma Rose Hollands returns again with her review of The Sons of Thestian by M.E. Vaughan.
This is the BBC Book Bloggers Corner.
Characters die in fantasy. A lot. You only need to look at some of the most popular books in the genre, Game of Thrones, Harry Potter, Mistborn, and you'll find a death toll the size of the Empire State Building. Death is not only an efficient way of removing characters and furthering the plot, but it's also a universal truth of the world, one which, in the right hands, can be taken to emotional heights when translated into fiction. The Sons of Thestian by M.E. Vaughan is one of these books, not just when dealing with death, but with love, grief, friendship, and the fear of fate itself. This book strikes at these fundamental principles with brutal clarity. The story begins with Prince Jehonahan of Hamartia, destined to rule the throne after the assassination of his older brother. Yet, when the king falls to his deathbed, the balance of power tips in favour of the malicious queen, and besieged by supernatural visions of his death, Jehonahan flees the city in fear of his life. Rufus Merle, a prodigy of the royal magi, is sent to bring him home. A Sidhe warrior named Faye befriends the frightened prince, and together the trio travel through the dangerous fairy wood. Against bandits, evil spirits, and cursed priestesses, these unlikely friends walk a path fraught with danger. The weight of the crown hangs in the balance, and perhaps the fate of the kingdom itself. There are two things which I highly commend this book for. First, its ability to use multiple points of view in a way that's not only easy for the reader to follow, but one which is used to great effect. Each character feels and sees the world differently, from the cynical Rufus Merle to the jaded eyes of Arlen Zachary to the brave and reckless loyalty of Faye. Instead of falling into the trap of having too many points of view and not enough character, The Sons of Thestian presents a vivid and varied cast which, whether villain or hero, you'll find yourself sympathising with to a greater or lesser extent. Secondly, the plot. Looking at the blurb, I assumed I knew the general gist of this story. A runaway prince, a wizard sent to find him, he discovers responsibility to the kingdom, probably some dark secrets, blah blah blah. But boy, was I not only wrong, I was punched so hard in the gut by those plot twists that my heart was literally living in my throat. That being said, there are some scenes that just didn't do it for me. At the time I took them in my stride, but now with hindsight of the ending, I wonder what the purpose of those scenes were. Some provided foreshadowing, others a bit of characterization, but there are a number of scenes, especially when the characters arrive at a certain location, that slowed the momentum of the plot. But overlooking these flaws, The Sons of Thestian was a great book to read. I loved the main characters, the enemies, the twists, and the final moments of this book had me staring out into the void, contemplating everything I knew about life. If you're a fan of high fantasy or Arthurian legends and want a new series to sink your teeth into, then I recommend giving this book a shot.
Book Bloggers Corner.
That's The Sons of Thestian by M.E. Vaughan, as reviewed by Emma Rose Hollands, and you can find more of Emma's reviews and blogs at whywordswork.wordpress.com and follow her on Twitter at ERHollands. Right, let's get back to my chat with Niki Mackay, where I asked Niki about her upcoming novels and her writing process in general. So you're working on book 2 at the moment, and have you already got other books coming down the line in your mind?
I've got plans, and I'm sort of to and froing. I'm talking to my agent at the moment. I've got plans for books 3 and 4, so I've got sort of rough ideas of what I want them to be about for this series. So it's and that kind of having to think ahead is quite new for me. So it's good. It's really good discipline. So yeah, that's what I'm itching to get on with next.
Yeah, and how has it felt? So I think as we record this, I think the book's been out 3-4 weeks or something like that.
I think it's about 3 or 4 weeks. It came out on the 19th of April, and it's out in ebook and trade paperback.
Yeah.
At the moment, so the main edition of my book actually will come out on I think it's the 26th of July, and it's the mass market paperback, which will be in all the shops and what have you. So yeah, it's kind of like a staggered release, which has been nice because I've been really lucky. The sort of the first couple of I've had a couple of really awful reviews, and that's kind of like getting sucker punched, isn't it?
I was going to ask you about that. Yeah.
Yeah, and then I had a couple of reviews that kind of hurt, and then on the whole they're really, really good. Yeah. And yet still those bad ones
that's the one that you
glare
remember.
out at you. So it's a nice soft ease into it, I think.
I think once anything's out into the world, especially on Amazon, I mean, you can. I mean, I've talked about this before, but you can go and search out a recognised classic or like a Stephen King bestseller or whatever it is. You can always find, at least one, usually 10, absolutely horrible, terrible reviews that are just, this person, it's almost like they thought they'd got a different book, or sometimes they're just trolls. And
it's so subjective. Of course it is, isn't it? And I've got this lovely editor who knew that I was upset about bad reviews, and she sent me a link to all the 1-star reviews for The Great Gatsby on Amazon, and they are hysterical. So it kind of, and it is subjective. Of course it is. And I don't enjoy every book I read, but I'm unlikely to spend 8 hours with something that I don't like in the first 100 pages as well. So I find it bizarre that people
that I'm exactly the same. I mean, if it hasn't got me by sort of 50 pages, I mean, I'm pretty impatient. If it's really not for me, and we've all picked up books that are just for whatever reason they're just not your bag or whatever, or you just can't get into them. I think the only time I would ever go on and leave an absolutely terrible review is if it was shoddy. It was badly written, as in spelling mistakes and names changed, and that maybe just from a sheer point of view of they haven't taken the care with the actual end product. But for anything else, I just think, I just tend to just leave. If I liked it, then I'll leave a good review, and if I don't, then I just don't leave anything.
Yeah, and I think it's part of the course, and maybe it's something that you get used to as well. And speaking to other writers, that the general sort of consensus is don't read your reviews. So I think that's something I'm going to have to learn, is just don't read them.
Well, it's got an average of 4.03 at the minute on Goodreads, so you're doing pretty
fantastic.
well. So,
okay, cool.
So
good to know.
Ignore all those, ignore the couple of dodgy ones that you've had. You're always going to get those. It's easy for me to say because it's not my book, but I know exactly what you mean. Yeah, it's always easier, isn't it, to recall those little comments that are slagging it off rather than
I think it is. And it's just, and then you get reviews. I mean, the blogging community is amazing, and there's bloggers that I read reviews of, and you get a review from one of them, and that's really nice as well. And so it's I mean, a lovely experience, and it's such a privilege, isn't it, to be published? I mean, gosh, I was a little girl thinking maybe one day I might go up to be a writer. So it's just, it still doesn't really feel real. I don't know about it. It still doesn't feel quite real. Yeah,
well, that's great. That's exciting, though, isn't it? And that's going to come across in your writing and stuff as well.
Yeah.
So if you were sitting down tomorrow you are sitting down tomorrow to carry on doing the line edits on your book. If you're listening, agent, she'll be sitting down tomorrow. But if you were sitting down tomorrow to write a new book, to start a new book, how would you go about it? Have you kind of mentioned you plow into the first draft and you edit the first 15,000 words, but if you were coming up with something tomorrow, have you got like an ideas file that you go in and kind of test ideas? You think, okay, has that got legs, or what about that one? Or is it literally you just wait until the momentum's there and then you go for it?
Yeah. Ideas file is too fancy, like for what I have. What I have is I have my mobile, which I carry around with me, and I randomly email myself things as they come to me.
Yeah.
So I'll get snippets of ideas and I'll just email them. So what I have is a really cluttered inbox that I kind of have to work through.
Yeah.
And things, so it might be something that I'm watching or something that I read in the news or a certain feeling I have somewhere, and I'll just ping things off to myself, and then I get ideas for characters. And that's when I know that I'm probably ready to start planning.
When you've got the characters sort of...
When I've got a character in mind, and I can sort of start fleshing them out and getting a feel for what they might be like. That's kind of a start. It's always the starting point for me, I think. And then I'll just write blind and see where it goes.
And see what happens.
Yeah.
Whilst we were on the subject and you're talking about not having an ideas file and having to trawl through emails, I've been there before. I recommend Evernote if you've never tried it before.
Okay, I'm making a note of Evernote.
Yeah, and you can, I think they do like a free version for, if you don't need like loads and loads and loads of stuff. And you can actually have different notebooks within that, and it will sync. You can have it on your phone, you can have it on your laptop, you can have it on whatever.
That's so cool.
And it all syncs up. So, because I use that all the time, and I've got like a same sort of thing, story ideas or whatever, and I can just send a photograph to it, or I can just type a little note in, and off it goes, and then you haven't got to trawl through anything. You can just
That's
do a
such
search.
a good idea. And I'm about to start looking into, and the fear has kept me away, but I'm about to start looking into, I think it's Scrivener. I was discussing
Scrivener. Oh yeah.
Is it Scrivener, or Scrivener? We can't, it's
Scrivener.
Okay.
Scrivener.
Okay, good to know. So I am going to download that, and I am going to do the tutorials, because trying to manage a huge 100,000 word document in Word can be a bit of a headache. So this is my goal.
I agree, and I am like you. I mean, I am completely averse to Excel spreadsheets and all that stuff.
Okay, cool.
And when I got Scrivener about, I don't know, maybe 5 years ago originally, when I did NaNoWriMo, and you got like a special offer on it if you completed NaNoWriMo. So I did it.
Oh, wow.
I did it and got that. But when I first got it, I was all excited. I'd seen like, it's got a corkboard and it's got this and that, and I opened it up.
Amazing.
And after about half an hour, I was like, oh my God, I want to put my head through the window. It was driving me crazy. But because it does look really daunting when you first open it. But one of the things actually that really clicked for me was Joanna Penn did, I think if you sign up to her, if you're not already, sign up to her mailing list or whatever, you can get, I think one of the things that she sends is like I can't remember how she describes it, but it's like a little video basically, and it's basically just shows you how she uses it to write novels, and it's very short. It's only like 10 minutes or something.
Oh, cool. Okay.
But it's kind of it just kind of clicked. I mean, it was essentially like the way that she uses the binder. I mean, everybody can use it in a different way anyway, but the way that she uses a binder, and each document is a chapter, or you can have it as a scene, or however you break your novel up. I've got mine in chapters.
Okay, cool.
And then especially when you're doing structural editing, you just grab the chapter or the scene and you just drag it to where you want it to go. So if you want it to be in between those two chapters, then you just drag it up and do it, and it is brilliant. And then you can compile it as a Word document, or a PDF, or a Kindle file, or you name it.
Okay, that sounds so useful.
And then you've got the little corkboard thing on there as well, which is good, but the reality is you need a huge TV screen or something to get the benefit of that.
Yeah, and I mean, I can't work out Pinterest for love nor money, so corkboard's me just it's a step too far, I think.
Yeah.
But the organising, the structure and stuff sounds really good. And I think Joanne Penn was at Crime Fest at the weekend, and I recognised her and was too scared to say hi as an aside. But yeah, no, I do, and I've listened to her podcast as well, which is wonderful.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, well, I recommend it. And then if not, then there's also Scrivener Virgin, I think. Which is Anne Rainbow, and she's got loads of she's been on the show before a long time ago,
cool.
and she's got lots and lots of tips on her website. So I'll maybe put that in the show notes. But yeah, I'm a bit of a Scrivener evangelist, so whenever it comes up,
everybody is who's used it, aren't they? Everybody.
I think so. Although I had a conversation with Wayne Leeming from Obliterati recently, and I mean, I don't think he's actually used it, but he's completely, into Word, and he can get it to do everything that he wants it to do, which you can if you like, you've got loads of time and you really...
Oh, it's hard when you're rewriting. No,
I don't find it easy, yeah.
I'm having to remove chapters at the moment that I might want to use later, and it's like having to move them from one document to another, renumber everything.
Exactly. If you've got 80,000 words in a single document, because I think some people use Word, but they write separate chapters.
Oh God, that's so organised, isn't it?
It is, but
so organised.
But again, you've still got to then think, right, which order do they go in? Yeah. You can't actually see them in a single document, unless you use, I don't know, merge or something. I don't know. I've no idea. So
that sounds really admin heavy and just beyond me. So I'm just going to wipe it from my mind.
Yeah. But Scrivener does scripts as well. It's got like a simple kind of script thing again, which I use for work, for doing scripts and things. So that's. And it's cheap. It's not very expensive.
Yeah, it's not even that expensive.
It's much cheaper than Microsoft stuff. So
I will. It's my aim. I'm going to get through line edits and then make the change. I think I'll have to.
Have you spoken to your editor or anything about it? Because that's the only thing that I heard was like sometimes. Your editor's like, well, how are you going to be sending me the documents? But you can still send them anything that you would normally send them, a Word doc or a PDF.
Yeah, I think as long as I can change it into a Word document, which is how we work at the moment, I think that's fine. I think I will check with her, but I think that's
the issue is the track changes thing is the only thing that you might find. But you can still use Word to do the.
I could use Word for that stage of it or something. Yeah, I'll check with her. I'm sure I can't be the first one. She's got loads of authors who are far more experienced than me, and I'm sure are already using it. So,
but I recommend it. That's the Scrivener advert done anyway. So
okay, thank you.
Okay, well that's brilliant. So so kind of as we wrap things up, so why don't you tell people where they can find you on the web?
Oh, okay. Am I on Twitter? I'm at Niki Mackay Books, which is NIKIMACKAY Books. And I've got a website, nikimackay.com. And on Facebook, I'm Madison Atterley Books.
Excellent.
Well, I'll put all that. If you just search Niki Mackay, it will come up. I'll send you the links.
Yeah, I'll pop it all in the show notes. I can find it all. I can find it all anyway. I as soon as it starts talking about Facebook, I'm the same. I never remember what my things are on Facebook. So.
And I'm not that good at using it either. I live on Twitter mainly.
Same as me. It seems to be a pattern. It seems to be most people I have on this show tend to live on Twitter rather than Facebook. But
it's where everybody spends time during writing hours.
Procrastinating away.
Yes. Reading long threads.
Exactly. Yeah, and your website's excellent actually. There's loads of decent stuff, so people should go and check that anyway. It's got lots of stuff about the writing process and your kind of journey into,
and it really needs updating, which I will do. So I'm about to put a post up about Crime Fest and stuff, which I will get done this week. It's on my list of things to do. So
excellent. Okay, well it's been great talking to you. So for the time being, thanks a lot, Niki. That's been great.
Okay, thanks, Wayne.
Okay, thanks again to Niki, and be sure to take a look at her book Eyewitness, out now on Orion, and I'll put all of those links in the show notes over at joinedup.co.uk. Well, that wraps things up for another week, but don't forget you can find the entire back catalogue of interviews on the website. Make sure you subscribe at Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, Overcast, or wherever else you get your podcasts from, and then you can have the show downloaded automatically every week. Also, remember to get in touch with all your writing news, views, questions or comments, and tweet me with where you're listening to and why you enjoy the show, and I'll give you a mention in a future show. Until then, thanks for listening. I'm Wayne Kelly. Happy writing and reading, and I'll see you next time.